everyone, and welcome to episode number 15 of Exploring Genuine Transformation. My name is Lori Beth, and this is a show I've been doing for about 4 months where I am interviewing and speaking to thought leaders, therapists, coaches, healers, all kinds of people who are at the leading edge of transformation and what it really means, what genuine transformation really means in this day and age. And so it's been an amazing show so far, interviewing people on all kinds of topics. And today I have the pleasure of interviewing Mona Motwani, and I'm going to add her now, and then I will introduce her more. So here she's coming on. Okay. It keeps cutting you off, Mona, every time I try to bring you on the camera. Can you try on your end? We are having some technical difficulties today. I see you there. Okay. This should work.
Okay. Do you have me?
Yay! Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm really excited to have Mona on the show today. Mona is a dear soul sister that I actually met first on Facebook. And then we found out that we have a lot in common. And in the realm of transformation and in the realm of this topic today, which is the topic is finding true freedom in the darkest circumstances. And so this is Mona and I, in our own ways, have had very intense life journeys, going into the darkness and finding freedom there, and finding peace and finding love and finding all the things that you don't necessarily think you're going to find there when you open to what is. And so and Mona and I share a mentor, and so we've also had other opportunities to be in groups and be in contact in a really juicy, transformational way, Zachariah Crawl.
Yep.
And he has also been on my show. He was the second person on. So I'm just really excited to have Mona on the show today and to be discussing this topic, which is like one of the topic that is probably the most dearest to my heart as well.
Yep.
And to hear from her, I know, because I know her well, I am continually inspired by Mona and her journey of opening and surrendering to the darkest states that a human can really go through. And I know personally that Mona inspires me every day, knowing that she's out there doing her thing. So just by the way of introduction of who Mona is a human rights lawyer turned entrepreneur, writer, speaker, and humanitarian. And she's also experienced, and I'll let her speak to this more, but for the last 15 years has experienced some of the most intense health challenges with late-stage Lyme disease, traumatic brain injury, complex PTSD. And so literally she is in the trenches every day of her life. And I know that there's been there are harder periods and periods where it's a little bit, probably a little bit better, but still hard. And so one thing I'm just really excited about, and one thing I love that Mona always speaks to is what I get from Mona is that it's like, if she can open to these states for 15 years, we can all do it, it's possible. It's possible in a range of circumstances, whether it's you're in debt or you're you know, you don't have the relationship that you want, or you have an illness, or, you know, all the number of things that we think that we can't possibly be happy and peaceful and even ecstatic sometimes, if we don't, you know, if we're not on the other side of those challenges.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so I'm really excited for everyone to get to experience Mona and just her continual saying yes to life, which is one of the things that she often says. And so so that was a long introduction, and I would love to hand it over to you if there's anything you want to add to that, or if we just want to kind of dive into the topic of finding true freedom in the darkest circumstances.
Yeah, I'll just share a little and then I think we can dive in.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that intro. I'm so honored to be here, and you know that I am super inspired by you too, and just the soul connection to be connected to other people that are on this journey. It's in a different way, shape, or form is so supportive. So yeah, so basically, you know, the last 15 years have been like full back to back, almost like fight or flight, like late stage Lyme disease, traumatic brain injury, autoimmune disease, severe depression, panic attacks, anxiety. That probably started 20, 30 years ago. You know, off and on, and then the complex PTSD, which like makes itself very known. As soon as you're at a safe place, the trauma comes up to be seen. And so all these states, you know, it's really funny because when I tell people, they're like, wow, I can't, you know, looking at me, because it's invisible, right? Nobody can see what is happening. And that's the truth with all humans. And so, you know, I just ask, like with anybody, we have no idea what's going on behind closed doors. And so, yeah, so my journey, I just wanted to share, is also one of like great joy. And the only reason I experience the level of bliss and joy that I do on the particular days that I do is because I have met and opened to those dark states. Like that is really, you know, the saying, the only way out is through, is really, it has meaning. So yeah, so I just wanted to share that part.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, thanks for giving more of your background. And I mean, that's a good place to begin. You know, how, just maybe for you to talk about, you know, in your journey, how have you found that you were able to open to such challenging mental and emotional and physical states kind of in the now?
Yeah.
You know, in the
So, I mean, I'm not going to lie and pretend it was easy. Like I just like laid down one day and I was like, surrender. You know, it's been 15 years ongoing. And like the first decade, I was doing a lot of inner work, but you know, you're in resistance because you're a human. So at first, for something very, for instance, very intense to happen, where you're just like, boom, you're a healthy, athletic, vibrant, young 20-something, and then you're in bed and your parents are like spoon feeding you and you're crawling to the bathroom, and you're like, then it's like 3 years, and then it's 5 years, you know, you're just, it's a very stark contrast. Like everything is shut down, you're in debt, your career is gone, your life is gone, your health is gone, the disease attacks your brain and your nervous system. So it doesn't just like leave your brain alone, it attacks that as well. So it's almost like your mind is taken from you as well. And then what I've been able to do, with deep help of Zachariah, our mentor, who, you know, is just an amazing human being, is to drop in, to become like, you know, and it's taken stages, but to drop in to being with the emotions that are there. And when I say being with them, like opening, you know, some people ask me that, they're like, how do I do it when something really challenging comes up? And I'm like, almost just like it's a little child. Like, how would you treat a little child or a friend who is in need? You would sit with them and just ask them, what is it that you need? And I do that sometimes with my physical symptoms. I'll have really disabling symptoms, and I'm like, all right, I'm listening to you, and what is it that you need right now? Like, what is it that I can give you? And sometimes they'll just say, we just want to be heard. They'll say, we don't want to be fixed. Stop trying to fix us, right? Because when you have a health challenge, you're constantly doing treatments. And the same with deep emotional states. It's like opening in the witness state, right? Which a lot of us who've done deep work can get to a state where we are, like last night, I was having the borderline panic as I was processing some trauma. And I called a friend because I was crying, and then the friend didn't answer. And so I just like sat down and I was like, this is the place where if I deepen my breath and I slow down and I watch what's happening and I watch who's there and I expand my state. I can't show you on the screen, but if I expand my state of presence, so like all the way out, so that it's big enough to be with the thing that feels explosive. The thing that feels explosive is actually smaller because my presence and my groundedness and my centeredness allows it to be there like a little child that just wants a hug or just needs to cry. And, you know, so that we can talk more about that, but that expanded state of presence is dropping into the witness state and just like literally in the moment asking, can I be with this discomfort right now? Yes, I feel like I'm going to die, or yes, I feel terrified, or I feel completely alone and I can't stop crying. Can I be with myself, or can I ask a higher power, spirit, God, whatever the word is you want to use, to walk with me as I navigate this? And like I do this over and over, and I know you do too, because we talk about it. And it is like a surefire way to a miracle. You know, miracle doesn't mean that, oh my God, all my problems are gone. It means that I find peace in that moment, because this is life, right? Like life is happening and we get to choose our response. That's all we get to choose. And that's like, it's like Viktor Frankl talks about that, the Holocaust survivor, that there's a space between response and stimulus. And in that space, right, is our freedom and or growth and freedom. So, you know, I'm making it sound so simple, and I'm not trying to make it sound simple. It's fucking hard, excuse my language. Yeah. But it is so doable. And I feel, I know you too go through this. I feel like I'm at the state and you are that the presence, I'm able to be present no matter what, to the place that almost nothing scares me anymore. I'm like, that horrible thing could happen. I can be with it. Because I can become intimate with fear. I can become intimate with an uncomfortable experience, and I can open to it. That is the way through, to open to it.
Well, it's so, I love what you just shared, and I want to just sort of like say a little bit about it and add some, because it seems like, you know, when you talk, I love this going back to the expanded presence. You know, first you talked about kind of being a mom to yourself and really asking what you need, and then kind of holding that, and also being in the moment of the now. So that's one piece that I think is so important to highlight, that yes, if we're thinking like, you know, 10 steps ahead or tomorrow or how am I going to get out of this, like then we're in fear, right? And then we need to open to fear, because that's actually not what's necessarily happening in the now. And so there's something about being able to align and be present with, it's just this moment. Okay, now it's just this moment.
Yeah.
That seems like an important point. And then when you were speaking about the expanded presence, and it was just, I love that description of it, you know, of sort of like, it, to me, it feels like you named it as the witness, but it's also you're also embodied, right? Like you're also an embodiment. So the witness to me is, and Zachariah talks about this too, you know, like the masculine, and then there's and I'm fully inside of this experience. Like I'm fully allowing this experience in the body, which I think is more of the feminine. Yeah, it's you know, it's more in the feminine, but it's also with the masculine, sort of holding it all. But yeah, it seems like that's also a really important point, that it's not just like, I know that the shift has been for me, and I'm sure it has for you too, that it's not just like, oh, I'm this witness of what's happening. It's like, no, I'm fully embodying this. I'm fully becoming this right now. I'm letting the energies completely move through me.
Yes.
In this like expanded presence and witness space.
Yes.
So I just wanted to add that, because
Yeah, no, I love that. That's really important, the embodiment, right? Because like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us who have trauma, when we are in fight or flight, we, for me, dissociate. Like my trauma was at
Mm-hmm.
six, base trauma was so early, it was 6 weeks old that my, we know about trauma that it rewires the brain to be in a certain state. And
Mm-hmm.
so I dissociate very often when I've had those PTSD triggers in the past. Like now I can watch myself and I can like bring myself back in thanks to the work of Zachariah and my amazing therapist. But um, yeah, the embodiment is so important because the first thing I wanted to do for 10 years of all of this was just, well,
Mm-hmm.
we didn't have smartphones then, but I would look at anything. I would look at the television. I would, like think. So I would distract. And there's no judgment on distraction, but that's the natural human way to deal with pain. And I didn't have access at that point to alcohol. I couldn't drink alcohol. My liver would shut down. I couldn't take drugs. I would die. I couldn't like go dancing. I couldn't go to a party. I couldn't overwork. I couldn't go to like Bhutan and sit in a cave. So I didn't have anything outside of myself. I pretty much could just be with myself. And I would often distract myself. And then once I started to embody my, because that's the, like Pema Chodron talks about, the wisdom of no escape. When your feet are nailed to the ground and you don't have an escape, then you are forced, which is a blessing, to embody where you are, like even becoming intimate with the physical pain and becoming intimate with the emotional pain. Like you said, the intimacy is not just in the mind and it's not just in the witness, it's also in the embodiment, in the being present here and like bringing our attention right back into the body. And there's so many people that do amazing somatic, I know you do amazing stuff too, but like somatic practices as well to be in the body. But that's why I sit on the earth so much, because if I put my bare feet on the earth, I ask her to help me come back into my body and to be present with these aspects, like almost as if they're exiled parts of us, like shame, right? Abandonment, terror, guilt. I'm not good enough. Nobody loves me. Whatever. And then like, I almost like watch them like little children and like ask them to come back to my heart and say like, when you're ready, you're welcome. There's a space here in my heart for you. I did this last night on my harmonium. I was playing and I was like, there's a space for you to come back here into my heart, and you are welcome here anytime. You're not forced, because little kids will not be forced. They come when they come. And so whenever these aspects of ourselves that are exiled or abandoned by us are finally coming back, like a soul retrieval, that we can open our heart to them and like welcome them. And like even those icky feelings, like, oh my God, am I, I had questioned if I was a good person the other day. I'm like, am I selfish? Did I do this horrible thing? I feel really uncomfortable. And I had to be present in my body with that. So I think, like you said, that's so important. If it's just in the mind, it's not integrated, right? It's the mind and the body.
Well, I have so many questions for you, but one is that just given all the intensity that you've experienced in your body, in the past when you were not fully inhabiting your body, what was then happening? Like, what would you say? How did that impact kind of all of these symptoms? Because you have a very, I think, unique case. I have this sometimes, well, with physical states sometimes, and obviously deep emotional states that are very in the body. But I think in your case, because there's so much that's always been happening in your body, that's like some of the most painful, difficult states, it's like, my curiosity is that if you're not fully inhabiting that and you're, either you're kind of just maybe witnessing it helps, but yeah, like what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was not aware that I wasn't inhabiting myself. So, but from this state, I can tell you that it was extremely painful, meaning I can be in a lot of pain. I can have vertigo. I can be dizzy. I can be projectile vomiting, and I can be at peace. But I could also be in those states and be terrified, panic attacks, which is normal. It's a normal human experience, like, reaction. This is never going to end. So the suffering was exponential. I was in constant suffering because my belief was, until the external circumstance goes away, I will not be at peace. Therefore, boom, I'm going to fight Lyme disease. I'm going to fight this thing. I'm going to fight that, fight depression. That just, like, you know, it's just pushing more of it. And so I was in a cycle of illness for a long time. Granted, I did get out of Lyme disease for a while. I was in remission and I was like, oh, I healed. And then sure enough, because the underlying states of emotion were still there, because the trauma is so connected to the body for me and most people, but for me especially, the illness and the dis-ease state is so intertwined with the trauma. It came back as, you know, toxic black mold, autoimmune, I had traumatic brain injury. And then I would even start having the symptoms just when I had a trauma reaction. My body would start having crazy vertigo. And that's how I knew the trauma was so intertwined with the illness. So basically, it's kind of like I put a Band-Aid over things for a while. And then it was like whack-a-mole. You whack something, it came back later. You whack it, another one came up. And people who have chronic illness understand this. And there's no judgment like that the illness is coming back up because you haven't done your work. It's more that there are always aspects to be seen. There's physical work to be done, of course. And then for me, it was just constant suffering. I numbed out. The only thing I could numb out with was television. I would sit in my parents' basement with an IV pole for like 20 days in my pajamas and just like watch, because I couldn't be with reality. It was too painful. I didn't want to live, and I couldn't be with that state. And so the suffering was perpetual. And anytime another circumstance came to reflect that, I would be in more suffering. So, you know, I don't blame myself. I was doing the best I could as a human. And then I luckily had the most amazing practitioners and healers and people and friends come in to support me into opening up to my different states, you know?
Well, it seems like what you're talking about, which was another one of my questions that got answered, was just what happens when there's resistance, right? Like when you're not fully able to kind of be in that witness state and inhabit, you know, the experience and be, like you said towards the beginning, like, you know, we often have an agenda, and that agenda is all to get out of the suffering, which is totally normal and human, but it's also another form of resistance. And like even the subtle, you know, even that subtlety of, oh, I want this to be over. Oh, if I sit with this, then maybe it won't be so bad. You know, is another form of resistance. And what you're really speaking to, I mean, you spoke to a couple of points. One is that it sounds like, and a lot of people with chronic illness have this, that if the more sort of resistance that there is to opening, like the more mental and emotional states can kind of accompany that, and it just kind of blows up, and it can even impact the physical body, which makes sense. I think we're always actually being, even those of us who don't have chronic illness, we're always being impacted on our physical bodies, especially if we are open and we are sensitive, which is one thing we haven't really addressed yet.
Yes.
Which is like, you know, some of us are way more empathetic and way more sensitive naturally, and we just are feeling not only our own energies, but the energies all around us and the energies of the collective. And so it's like, you know, yes, it's like, yeah, it would be nice to kind of shield from that, but there's actually, it's like the more we open to it and without resistance, the more that, you know, it's possible, like the topic of this talk, to find that freedom, to find that joy, to find that ecstasy, even when we're experiencing some of the worst states, and they can be going on simultaneously.
Yes. Totally.
But I so love the conversation of resistance, because I always joke that I'm like the queen of resistance. I feel like I spent like most of my life, since I was suffering so intensely since I was a little kid, with some of the worst, like, you know, sort of psychological, emotional states that turned into more physical states. But that, you know, it's like, yeah, I just always, it's like knowing that resistance. I mean, resistance for me just kept me in the game. It just made things, it's like it all sort of just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And, you know, the suffering was worse. My experience of life was worse. And I know for me that as I've been able to let go of that resistance, I love that I went through the journey because I can short track it for other people.
Yeah.
Nobody else has to go through that level of resistance. But
Yeah.
I know that, like, you know, as I have sort of, as I continue to be able to truly just open to the moment of now with no other agenda, but simply being with what is and experiencing as it is, and even experiencing, like we're talking about, ecstasy and joy and positive states with that, the more that it moves through. I mean, it may come back the next day, but the more that it just keeps, you know, it's like there's just more flow. There's just more ease. There's just more, even, I mean, we were going to talk about neuroplasticity. There's more neuroplasticity. Like there's shifts in the brain, like literal shifts.
Yes. Yeah. And like, gosh, there's so many things here, and it's so exciting. But so, you know, like that state, the surrender state, the opening state, the surrendering is opening. And right, surrendering doesn't mean laying only in the starfish pose and just like, although I've done that many times, just lay there, but it means non-resistance to the moment. So not being in resistance. So it doesn't mean being in non-action completely, but that surrender state is also an opening. And that opening is a witnessing, and it can be a witnessing, an embodied witnessing. And the witnessing is actually curiosity. And the curiosity is a form of play. And as we know, our brains are 10 to 100 times more neuroplastic, more able to create change when they are in play. So surrender is in fact the most neuroplastic state that you can be in, which I did not know. And I'm just going to credit Zachariah Kroll for that whole thing I just said, because he's the one who taught it to me. And when he did, my body and literally shifted overnight. I dropped into a state of surrender where I understood that my body went into a state, and I woke up and like I was a different person for the last, now it's been like 5 weeks. And this happens repeatedly as we do our work together. And that is really interesting because a lot of the personal development world is, and I am not judging the personal development world because I participate in all different forms of healing, and I don't judge any types of healing, but a lot of it is change your thoughts, make them positive, change your mind, focus on the good. And if we only focus on what we want without addressing the pain underneath, it will come back. It will always be there, right? You and I know that because we're so sensitive, we're so empathic. We process not just our stuff, but the collective and ancestral trauma. So it's all there. And so we get the gift of knowing what it's like to be so intimately aware of these states that we have to be in surrender. But those surrender states are neuroplastic. And like I follow Joe Dispenza, and I'm always like, you know, or different people that do neuroplasticity work where it's kind of like just redirect your mind. And I did some neuroplasticity practices where I was asked anytime I had a negative thought to just redirect my thoughts. So it was really great. I actually felt really high and amazing. And then 3 months later, and that was my experience, because there was still, for me, again, this is just my experience, trauma and emotional pain that I was processing that had to be presenced. So if it wasn't presenced, I could not shift. And like I said, then surrendering to these states has actually been more neuroplastic than any focus on positive type exercises for me. I have literally rewired my brain.
How do you, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's such a beautiful, just a beautiful path to take it down, that it's not just like, oh, I'm surrendering through, you know, there's not that like sort of almost pained surrender, but it's like an embodied surrender that leads to more curiosity and then more play as a result, and more neuroplasticity. I'm curious how you have noticed the shift in yourself, because I mean, one thing I just want to keep saying is that I know Mona, and she feels she still feels the most intense state. So I could see people watching this and feeling like, oh, and then this is going to help me get over this. And, you know, I think that that's what we're all looking for. And in my experience, sometimes there are certain patterns that I open to completely and I'm really in the fire with. and I'm completely surrendered to, and then they do shift. And then there are other states where they don't shift. That's just not, or it maybe takes years. And so, I think I would love to kind of hear both, your experience of that, because I know that you're still experiencing these states, and like what these shifts have actually done for you.
Yeah.
In your day-to-day experience and in your life.
Yeah. So, sorry, the first question was how I've experienced them?
Yeah.
So, for me, like, cause I experience these states all the time, right? It's so funny because you and I are talking and we're like put together and all that stuff. And I know the states you've been in, I know the states I've been in, and they are on the floor begging for mercy states. They are, I may need to go to the hospital states. They are extreme states. And where I now find my freedom instead of before, okay, I can't wait till this is gone. When is this trauma gone? When is this pattern gone? When is this gone? Then I'll be free. It's like, no, that is never the freedom. As we learned from Zechariah, the freedom is never, ever related to an external circumstance. Our freedom, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, is never related to the external circumstance being fixed, which I think most of us have been taught as human beings. Once that's good, I'm free. Once I'm in a good relationship, once my body's healthy, once my depression's gone, once I make enough money, I'm free. And for me, it has brought the most sense of peace, because in my states, like last night, for instance, I'm doing a one-woman show, as I shared with you personally, which is an embodiment of part of my life journey from this whole thing, this whole journey. And it is kind of from the underworld all the way up to where I am, the place that I'm experiencing. And in it, I am excavating parts of myself, and it is the most healing, transformative, challenging thing I've ever done. And I am experiencing, for instance, last night, one of my base traumas when I was like a baby, and I just started sobbing. And, instead of before, the narrative was, oh, this again. Oh, this is here again, which I used to say all the time. I used to say, I can't do this anymore, God. I can't do this anymore, friends. Because I'm like, this is like 12 years. Like, give me a break. Then it's like, okay, here it is again. Oh, and at first it's like, oh, I don't want it. And then it's this opening to it, and there's a freedom inside myself, because I know that I have the capacity to be with whatever state is there. And the more I have the capacity to be with that state, the more that it softens. I'm not going to say it's going away completely, because I don't know when it's going away completely, if at all, like we talked about. But it is allowing me to find true freedom in my life, so that I'm not scared of the outside circumstances taking away my peace and taking away my freedom. And that's why I keep saying yes to life. Yes to life, not meaning I'm going to go run a marathon tomorrow, because I just started walking like 20 minutes every other day. And I'm like, yeah, that's fucking awesome. Sorry, I keep swearing. And so yes to life means I'm going to show up. And if I am on the ground crying or in pain, I'm going to show up that day. And so I almost welcome each day as a new experience, because for me, it's late. The last 4 months were very intense, and it was like this. It had never been that roller coastery for me. Usually there was a linearity to the physical and emotional stuff. And so I just welcomed each day as a new opportunity to be with myself. It was really my full-time job. And I don't know if I'm answering your question, so please direct me back if I'm not. But it's in that I find the freedom to actually remember that there's nothing outside of me that can change that will give me freedom. It is only by being open and keep continuing to expand my presence and my groundedness and my love for myself. And then, like you and I can easily say, and I have said, this is too much for one person. This is way too much. And I can't do this anymore. And that's okay. That's human. But then there are days when I get reminded by friends, by people in my life, that like we here, our souls chose, if we believe, this mission, and that we're on a mission. And like we've already, think about how much work you and I have done, and a lot of people have done who are processing so much pain or whatever. that we're on a mission. And why would we abort the mission now, right? Like some days I was like, I'm out. Like I wanted to commit suicide,
Yeah.
you know, when I was very depressed. And I'm like, no, this is actually my mission. I'm here to complete a mission. My soul came. So why not complete it? Why not follow the mystery all the way? We don't know what the mystery is, but why not follow this mystery all the way with an open heart, right? And like that is ultimately what takes us to spirit, to a higher source, our higher self. You know, but
yeah, there's several things I want to highlight in what you said because I think they're so important. And yeah, my question was, you know, how is this? It basically was like, how is this impacting your life, right? Because you're still experiencing these states, and I think most of us, I think we are kind of trained to believe, like, oh, I'm going to open to these states, and then they're going to, you know, then I'm going to heal this. And there is healing that happens. It's true, like I said, you know, and you've experienced healing even in the midst of having these states, right? And we consider healing or transformational work as something, we often think about it as something that, you know, there's another, like, I don't want to say there's another side to, but like, oh, this thing isn't going to come up anymore because I've healed it. And that isn't always true.
No.
Obviously, we can also look at transformational work as what you're talking about, that you experience a lot more freedom amidst the struggle. And one of the things that really stuck out to me, which we haven't actually named, is that to me what you're speaking of is true sovereignty. Because I think so many of us, I think we're so trained, and you know, even like whether it's conscious or unconscious, there's this sense of like, I'm finally going to be soothed, like this pain is, or this discomfort is finally going to go away when I like have the perfect job, when I, you know, have that relationship, when I'm not in debt, or when I have money. And so we're dictating our kind of our true well-being and our true freedom on something that's outside of us. And I think that, you know, a lot of people, I mean, people do find fulfillment in those outside things. We all find fulfillment. Yeah. And yet there's such a deeper fulfillment when it's coming from the inside.
Yes.
And also, I know for me, when it's coming from that soul alignment, when it's coming from, you know, that full embodiment of my soul, that's like, oh yeah, this is what I'm bringing forth, which actually sort of, anyway, so that just really struck me, just that that's true sovereignty as well. And what, you know, the end of what you spoke to also, I found so beautiful, because it's like what you said, like this is your mission, and your mission, you know, to somebody else, it might seem like, oh, well, you know, I mean, I know you have created a business and you are a total badass in all kinds of areas. And your illness does, I know, prevent you from, you know, maybe doing what in your mind you would say all of what you want to do.
Yeah.
And yet what I see over and over with you, which is so inspiring, is like you are saying yes to your mission. You show up every single time you speak. You're an inspiration to other people. You're doing this one woman show, you know, like your journey is your purpose. Like your journey is the mission. And how much more satisfying that it's, you know, something that's not out there, but it's something that you're living.
Right.
So I think that's a really interesting and important sort of point for everyone, in terms of like, yes, we can find, you know, these states may not change. And if we are willing to open to life and take each step and be in the now, there is an expansion and a transformation and an opening and a contribution, and that happens, you know. And I would even add to that, which I didn't say before, but we've both referenced, like, I have other friends who are in this, where it's like they're literally just always processing the energies of the collective. Well, that's their mission. That's beautiful, you know, just because they're not out, like, you know, they're not, whatever, don't have this like huge business or, you know, this teaching this or doing that. And so I think there's just something very important in that's part of the mystery of it all.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And like, that's the other thing, right? Is the freedom is when like we want to, I mean, I was a human rights lawyer. I was like devastated that when I was a little girl, I went to India. My parents are from India. I went with a bag of pennies. I told my dad to crack open my piggy bank, and I was like, take all my pennies. we're going to India and I'm giving them, because my mom said, you're going to see people living on the street. And I'm like, what? Like, I grew up in Michigan. I don't know what people living on the street. I don't understand that concept. I didn't understand the concept of homelessness. Then you get to India and everybody's living on the street. It's very painful for an empathic, sensitive child. So I was told that. I brought my pennies on the plane and I gave them out. And like, pennies are useless in India. You can't do anything. But I was like, I have to give them to the people. And so I've always wanted to be a human rights lawyer. I always wanted to do something where I could be of service. And that was a very, you know, in my mind, service-oriented job. And then it was taken from me like a fucking, God, I keep swearing, I'm sorry. Like, it was taken from me. And then I was just like thrust into all my identities being sucked out of me, literally, like one by one, like a siphon. You know what I mean? Like, you can't dance, you can't do this, you can't have a job, you can't meditate. I mean, you can't volunteer, you can't do anything. You can literally go to Target for 3 minutes. That was my joy for one time a week that I would do in Michigan. And so I'm like, why would any higher power do this to me? Why would I, with so much to give, why would they take away my desire to serve? I was like, I was pissed. And rightfully so, until I finally understood that within me and within my journey, like you just talked about, my pain is my purpose. I finally understood that what I was cultivating inside was something even bigger than what I thought I could do as a human rights lawyer with paper. And here, let me fix you. No, let me be with you from the heart instead of from with the mind, even though I love to use my mind and my brain. Let me come to you with my heart. And sure, that may take 20 years of your life. Sure, it may take half of your life to cultivate this tool, but you will still be of service to the world. You will still be of service. And I'm only just now at 42 starting to, like, it's coming out, you know? And so I really feel, I think I might have gotten off point, sorry, but I really feel like there is a way in which we have to, when life is not working out the way we planned, like, oh my God, I'm supposed to have this business. I was supposed to be a human rights lawyer working at the United Nations. It did not work out. And I am finally okay with it because I see where the great mystery has taken me. Because I've opened and surrendered to these states. Now, like you said, some of the states are still there, but they are way, I used to be in fight or flight. I used to have friends come to hold me for hours. Otherwise, I would be like in such severe flashback states. And now I can generally self-soothe myself. And I can, within usually 10 minutes, bring myself back, not always. And so I'm okay with the fact that those body memories are still there and those emotions are still there, because if I keep opening to them, miracles actually do happen. Meaning, even though states may still be there, my body shifted the last 5 weeks into another state. And if it goes back down again, I will be, yes, unhappy, and I will have to be okay with it. And I know how to be okay with this because this happens all the time for me. And so it's like, it feels like a present moment awareness PhD. Like, what a gift that I have to basically be in present moment all the time, you know? And so if I know that my state is a little bit more extreme, but like, if people can somehow bring any of that awareness into life to bring more peace, miracles will unfold. Now my life is unfolding with beautiful opportunities, like to speak with you, etc.
Yeah, one thing, I mean, I want to add a couple of things because it's so beautiful what you said. And even that, the last statement that, now I'm forgetting what you said because I was tracking so many things. What was the last thing that you said? Do you remember?
About, let's see, what was I talking about? Yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, I had all the identities siphoned from me, about finding freedom, about the miracles that are occurring now, opportunities that are opening.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. One thing that I was going to say is that, well, one thing that struck me, right, is that, and I think so many of us have this, like, you can be a human rights lawyer, and yes, to some extent, like you want to be of service and you're doing it, and yet it's a little bit out there. It's like it is an identity.
Totally.
Where I feel like somehow the journey that you've been on and where you are now, it's like you are the living embodiment of your purpose, which is in my experience, because I feel like this is what's been kind of coming through me lately in my journey, you know, that like sort of similar, that it's like then that so even though there was this idea of, oh, I want to be these things, or this is how I want to serve, to actually have to be in the trenches, like to actually have to live it, it's like it's so fully in you that it's just like, and I see this in you, like every single time you speak, you know, I've seen you on different Facebook lives, and I know you spoke at the Global Hive conference, and I think that's what it was called. You know, that it's like you are speaking that which you have lived, and it is like, it's such a full embodiment. And there's, in some ways, there's no identity, there's no like ego identity, separate identity in it, because you are just, you know, the full embodiment of that. And so it's interesting, we've kind of gone this interesting direction of sort of like, not only that you can find freedom in these states, but you can also, you know, find your purpose, and that purpose is coming through the mystery.
Yes.
And the word that kept coming to me as well that we haven't spoken is trust. And I know in my journey that it's taken so many years to get to a place of trust, and it sounds similar for you, you know, of, okay, can I really trust that I can just step forward in every single moment of my life and open to what is, and allow this to be without having any clue where this is going to go, how, if it's going to change, you know, what it means, like any of that. It's like walking around in the dark, and yet the more that you do it, this has been my experience, the more that I'm actually do it, and then I see the jewels and the riches that come from it, including just the simplicity of being like, I can open to all of this and have no resistance. And experience freedom, and experience peace, and experience joy, and like I said before, ecstasy. Like, we haven't really spoken to this, but the experience of feeling pain and ecstasy at the same time. The experience in my world, it's like there's an experience of being in a non-dual field. Like everything is kind of becomes one. You know, and that those are like some of the most potent and beautiful states that, I mean, I wouldn't actually call that a state, but you know, experiences that we can have as humans. And so it's both, yes, we then get to live, we are that embodiment of what we live, and that's a beautiful thing, and we get to contribute. And I know for me, it's opened up all kinds of creativity and expression, and I know that's true for you. And there's also just the like, wow, I trust life, and I'm for it.
Yes, I love that. And that trust in life, I think, is right, is like a part of our opening, a part of our surrender, is when we hand something over to a higher power, or to our higher self, or to whatever word you want to use, that trust is right. Because as humans, it's normal to want to control outcomes, or say, I want this to be this way. And like, you and I have enough experiences, and I'm sure most people on the planet do, where things are not showing up the way they want them to, and that's okay. And sometimes it's for them. But like, for instance, with the trust, the show that I'm doing, this one woman show, it's like an embodiment. I call it a prayer formance, right? And I signed up to do it 11 months ago. And I'm like, I was so disabled. I had like I still have like the caretakers coming, like I could not function. And most people who see me out and about don't know that, because when I go out and about, I just like put on a normal face, and then I come home and go lay down and deal with my stuff. And so I had a show scheduled in June. I couldn't do it. There was no way. I could barely work. And finally it came that the date was to be set, and I was not well, like not well. The last thing on earth someone who is dealing with late stage Lyme disease, PTSD, et cetera, should be doing is a show when I had this debt, medical debt, and et cetera. But I sat and I asked my higher self, and it was like, you are meant to do this. This is an expression for yourself. This is a healing. And so I said yes. And I have 7 weeks about left, and I still am in the middle of writing the show. I then have to memorize. I don't even think I've ever memorized anything in my life since I was like in grade school. I have brain inflammation stuff. I'm like, how can I memorize stuff? How am I supposed to do this? I have 70% of my stuff dedicated to my health, but like, I kept trusting, right? And so now, as I started to trust, this process the last few weeks has literally every day I am excavating something, and I am basically, in Zechariah, we had a session about this. He's like, Mona, can't you see this is not about the show, but about the process? And the process is basically something that Spirit, God, whatever you want to say, has brought to you for your healing, your own self-healing, that your self-expression, your voice is being liberated to be witnessed for your service and healing. And I am literally watching the healing occur. It's not easy every day. And so no matter the show, it doesn't even matter, right? So like I'm trusting that Spirit has something when my heart says yes. And like you said, that means, and we've had to trust through very dark experiences of severe depression and panic and anxiety, and to trust, right? Like that we're not being punished, or there's nothing bad or wrong, but this is just what is, and we are here to be with it and to open to it. And I mean, that's a hard state to communicate to a lot of people, but I think a lot of us are knowing that that's part of our work, and part of our work in healing the planet just by being ourselves. Like you just said, we are the living embodiment of our purposes. So we don't have to do anything out there but by just being ourselves. I think it's revealed to us, right? What we are here to do, even if it's just, for me, sometimes it was just being in bed, you know, and being compassionate with other beings and loving and providing unconditional love to myself. That's a gift, right? If I can be unconditionally loving of myself my entire life, that's a life's work.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love what you said back to the expression piece, because thank you for that, because that's also been my experience of as I have, you know, as I have taken on things to express my purpose and my creativity more, and, you know, in writing and in my work, it feels like it's actually put me back into deeper processes.
Yes, totally.
It's like, I mean, that's what's been going on for me for the last year. And so just this, again, that trust, and that even through our expression and creativity, that brings deeper healing. It brings us back, can bring us back into the pain or into the discomfort, but then it's kind of a cyclical process. And I think that that's so important for people to hear, because, you know, some idea that, oh, I want to create this and I'm just going to go out there and create it. But the true embodiment of the creation, like, we don't get to choose how that happens.
No.
You know, and if we're really following it, we're really willing to open to that. It just, there's so many riches and jewels that come out of it. And in my experience, those riches and jewels aren't, they are money, they are business, they are the show, but it's everything. Like for me, it's been actually, I mean, that's what's been so beautiful in my experience over this last year, as I've kind of delved more into my purpose. It's like, it feels like, I thought that it was going to be, you know, having the clients or having money or, you know, having this great business, but it's actually in some ways like, those are just like, I mean, I love seeing clients. I love the work I do. It's like, those are, you know, those are just kind of the cherry on top almost. It feels like, oh, this is so satisfying because I'm not needing it for any reason, or I'm not, you know, to fill something inside. So there's that piece too. I think, I love you speaking to that. There was one thing that I wanted to just name, and maybe I could ask it as a question. It's a little bit of a question and a comment, and we talked about it a while back, but, you know, I just want to make sort of for our viewers, you know, we're talking about obviously opening to the darkest states, and we've been talking about how to do that in various ways, you know, throughout the show, like expanded presence, embodied surrender, being a mother to yourself, you know, connection to God and devotion to God. And I do just want to speak to the fact that it's also just like trauma is real, and the need for healing work is also real.
Yes.
Like, I think that we can open to these states, but Mona and I have also both, I mean, for years, worked with a lot of different practitioners and learned a lot of different modalities. And I am a therapist and a somatic healer, and a trauma specialist. So those are ways that it's, you know, important to, I think, along with what we're talking about, you know, and now I'm making a statement, but I'll ask you something about it more. It's just like, I'm curious about your experience of that, because I just want to name that it seems that this work happens kind of in conjunction. And the most beautiful thing is like what Zachariah does. And he's in a league of his own,
Yeah.
or, you know, I also combine those, and there's other people combining, like, how do we open to these states, but also how do we learn how to be with trauma and like regulate the nervous system, and how do we teach, you know, how do you learn that from different practitioners?
Yes.
How do you do that kind of, you know, titrating work and regulating work? And, you know, how do we go into the body and become more comfortable with our bodies?
Yes.
And so this is a long path. It's not just, you know, it's not just one thing. And so I just wanted to name that because it feels important in the conversation. Yeah. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts about that.
Yeah. And thank you for naming it, because I don't want people to think like, oh my God, I have severe trauma and this happened to me, and illness. If I just like embody and surrender, I'll be gone, right? That's like the danger when we have these conversations, that we leave these points out. So thank you for saying that. We're just delving into like the aspects that we ourselves are doing. And most of this stuff I learned from practitioners. I did not learn by myself. So I, like with really, really intense states of trauma, I have them, you know, one of the most amazing trauma therapists I worked with, who's really specialized. And basically he taught me everything I know about the inner child. And so like, I work with my inner child almost on a daily basis. I talk to her, and he has taught me ways to sequence, which is like preparing the inner child, because trauma is often too much too fast, or too little over too long, like whether it's emotional or physical abuse or traumatic circumstances. And it doesn't have to just be child, you know, as an adult, we have trauma as well. And so I have literally worked with practitioners from the day I began this journey. I started beforehand exploring with different people inner facets of my emotional, you know, like I had no boundaries. I said yes to everybody. I was constantly being I had no sense of self, and I had to like really do that work. And then I started getting into the trauma work, which was a lot learning about how to titrate, which means to like take baby steps with the nervous system. Even when I go to events or anything, like to literally titrate my system so that my nervous system is regulated. With breathing, I've done somatic experiencing work. I still do that work, which is allowing the body memories of trauma to be softly released and embodied. So a lot of work with Zachariah, with Michael, with other people, you know, and then physical modalities as well to allow in healing. And I've worked with spiritual practitioners, I guess you would call them, but really I worked with some of the best people in trauma. And if I didn't have them, there's no way I would be here. Like, it's so important to have support, you know, or EMDR. I mean, there's so many different modalities.
Yeah. Thank you for speaking to so many of the modalities that you have done. And I would also, I mean, I don't have much to add because you spoke to so many of them. One thing that I would also add is that, you know, with what Mona and I are talking about around developing this expanded presence and embodied surrender, really being able to open to these states, if you can't open to them, if you truly can't open to them, and there actually is a lot of dysregulation, it is not wise to try to.
Exactly.
It's actually wise to put your attention elsewhere and regulate your nervous system. I mean, similar to, you know, if a child is, you know, if a child wants something, the parent says no, and then the child starts screaming, you're not going, I mean, I'm also a child therapist, but you're not gonna, you know, you're not going to, the parent isn't going to focus on what the child wants or the conversation. There's going to put all their focus in getting that child back into a window of tolerance. So that they can actually be with what's happening. And so I think Mona spoke to so many of what's out there, and, you know, Mona and I could probably do several other interviews or lives. Maybe we will. On these topics, you know, especially like trauma is a whole topic in and of itself. And, you know, just to speak to that, and I think that they can work together. They can, you know, the kind of opening to what is approach and embodying it works in conjunction with trauma. It's also really important for people to be able to learn how to embody, like just to be in your body. And a lot of people don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I just want to add one thing to that is that, like, I wouldn't be able to, things that we're talking about, I wouldn't have been able to do those on my own even 6 years ago, because my system was so dysregulated. So at that point I could only work with a practitioner, and I could only have him assist me on understanding that relationship and then developing the dynamic there to get to this point. So like, you know, I just want people to understand that wherever they are is,
Yeah. Well, it feels like a good place to end. I know we've been on here for a while, and I think we got to speak to a lot of different aspects of, you know, finding true freedom in the darkest circumstances. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's such an honor.
And I would love for people to, I'd love for people to know where they can find you or follow you or learn more about your work and any offerings you might have.
Yeah. So if you go to my website, which is monamotwani.com, MONAMOTWANI.com, I'll have listed there where I'm speaking or writing. But right now I am working, if you do live in San Diego, I'm working on my first one-woman embodiment performance, prayer performance, I call it, which is going to be really a journey of like all the aspects that we've been talking about, like the darkness, the light, the joy, the terror, the sadness, but like just this journey of becoming and reclaiming my soul, kind of acted out into a monologue and performance. So that's November 7th here in Encinitas. And otherwise my website, or, you know, just reach out. I love to be connected to other beings doing this work and on this path.
Did you say what your website was?
Oh yeah, monamotwani.com. MONAMOTWANI.com.
Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And again, my name is Lori Beth, and like I said, I'm a therapist and a somatic and energy healer and a trauma specialist, and I do stuff with embodiment, meditation, and movement. And I currently am offering one-on-one mentorships, and my work is really about, for women, and actually teenage and college age young women. And my work is really about taking women into, it's a healing process, but it's also a transformational journey through going into the darkness. And like Mona and I have been talking about, it's about actually learning how to open and be with the darkness and the shadows and the places that we have not been looking at in order to experience more sovereignty, more wholeness, more power. I see it as like sort of reclaiming soul power. Because so either women have really struggled. I love working with women who have struggled, like kind of like in the ways that Mona and I have, and feel like they've done work with so many practitioners but can't seem to ever kind of like find their way through. And I also love working with women who maybe haven't struggled as much, but they are, you know, they're successful in life, and yet they feel kind of deadened and empty because they know that there's more. And they know, like, they may or may not know that they're sort of sourcing their happiness and power outside of themselves. So this is a way of completely reclaiming that. So if you're interested in working with me, you can reach out to me. And I will see you again next week. We have another amazing speaker, and I look forward to that. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mona. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Bye.